Welcome and good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. So my name is Helene Barr, and I'm the Bureau Chief of the Climate Change and Clean Energy Program here at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Just for a bit of background, my program oversees New Jersey's participation in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, fondly known as RGGI. You're going to hear that term a lot today, so just know that that means Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And my program helps to coordinate the investment of RGGI auction proceeds across the state agencies. And again, like I said, sort of oversees New Jersey's participation in that program. And I'm going to be your moderator today. So today is the first of 4 public stakeholder events to discuss the development of our next RGGI strategic funding plan. So this new funding plan is going to cover our RGGI auction proceeds collected starting in 2023 through 2025. And it's going to guide their investments in climate, clean energy, and equity programs and projects throughout the state. And this will be the second strategic funding plan for the state, the first one being published in 2020. So it's sort of exciting, and this is our first kickoff meeting. So this webinar today is really seeking feedback from you on what our funding priorities should be related to transportation. Transportation was a major topic in our first strategic funding plan, and I think that the state would like to carry that through into the next one as well. So the feedback received today will be used to inform our next funding plan. And I'd also like to note that yesterday we released our RGGI scoping document. And this really provides some detailed background on RGGI, the legislation governing New Jersey's participation, and some of the proposed funding initiatives that we're going to be discussing. And you can access that scoping document at nj.gov/RGGI/engage. So I know it just came out yesterday, but there's a lot of really great details in there. So for anyone that's not able to stay for this whole presentation or has an interest in getting a bit more in the weeds, I definitely suggest you check it out. Okay, so before we dive into the agenda, I just want to go over a bit of housekeeping. So currently, all online participants are muted. At the end of the presentations, we will have an opportunity for folks to unmute themselves and provide comments or questions. We will ask participants at that time to raise their hands, and then we'll take you off mute one by one, and we're going to form sort of a queue for the comments and questions. All of our panelists will try to address as many comments and questions as possible at the end of this presentation. Also, this meeting is being recorded. By being here, you agree to be recorded, and if you're not comfortable with that, you're welcome to leave. We're going to make this meeting available on our website at nj.gov/RGGI/engage. We also plan to circulate a link to these recordings after our last stakeholder meeting on April 18th. So all of these will be posted online. You can come back and take a look at them. You can, share the links with other folks. We would love to just keep getting as much feedback as possible prior to our April 21st end of comment period. So we'd also just like to remind folks to please keep your individual contributions brief to ensure as many guests as possible can participate in the discussion. And I also implore you to please keep your comments and questions to the topic at hand. This is very much your opportunity to provide meaningful feedback on how the state should invest its RGGI dollars. And the state agencies really want to hear your opinions on this. I want to acknowledge that there are a lot of other environmental and social issues we could be discussing, but today's meeting is really focused on how we can invest our RGGI dollars the best way on transportation projects. So please be respectful of that. I would also ask that folks be respectful in the chat. We have posted webinar chat ground rules. We're asking that participants utilize the chat to indicate if they're having technical issues so that we can help everyone readily participate in this webinar. We're also asking participants to refrain from thread jacking and utilizing this chat for unrelated discussions. So the chat is really meant to capture your comments and questions which are directly related and pertain to this webinar. And I know, I think my staff just dropped some chat rules. Okay, so on to the agenda. So the first half of today's webinar, you will hear from Bob Kettig, Assistant Director of Climate Change, Clean Energy and Sustainability at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. He will provide an overview of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, how it works, New Jersey's history with the program, and the laws and regulations governing the state's investments of auction proceeds in greenhouse gas reduction efforts. Next up, then, you're going to hear from transportation specialists from our 3 state agencies. They're going to go over the current landscape of transportation electrification in New Jersey and discuss in greater detail the potential projects and programs each agency could fund with RGGI investments, and how this would support the state's broader greenhouse gas reduction goals. Following the presentations, we will dive into an open public comment session. And throughout the webinar, we've sprinkled in a few polls just to keep it engaging. So to get a better sense of our audience today, we are asking everyone where they are from. So this poll is going to remain open and in the chat throughout the webinar, but I will give everyone a few moments right now to respond. So if you click on the chat button at the top, I think you should be able to see, as well as maybe automatically on your screen, sort of the makeup or breakdown of today's participants. So it looks like, we have quite a few folks from state government, local government, nonprofit, NGOs, businesses, and New Jersey residents, which is great. And, as people come and go and take that poll, it will change over time. Okay. So in the event that you can't stay for this full session and you have more detailed comments that you would like to share, we have developed a survey to collect your feedback. You can access this survey through the QR code on the screen or by visiting nj.gov/RGGI/engage. This survey is going to be open until April 21st, and it really provides an opportunity for open-ended commenting at the initiative level. So as you walk through the survey, you're going to have an opportunity to provide comments, feedback on each individual initiative. So I suggest, if you have more information you want to share, if you think about something later that you didn't have an opportunity to share in this webinar and aren't able to join the other ones, this is definitely an outlet and opportunity for you. Okay, so now I'm going to hand it off to Ram Akella, Managing Director of Innovation Impact from the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, to formally kick us off. Thank you.
Elaine, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm the Managing Director of Innovation Impact at the within the Economic Transformation Group at the EDA. Our raison d'etre is to support high-quality job creation, catalyze private investment, and build the country's most diverse, innovative ecosystem in New Jersey. Within the Innovation Impact Division, our financial products and programs align with Governor Murphy's vision to create a stronger innovation economy. These products are categorized in 3 distinct buckets: innovation programs that focus on emerging and early-stage companies and provide assistance such as engagement with angel investors, accelerator participation, and rent support for collaborative workspaces. The venture program focuses on engagement with angel and venture capital firms. Through partnership, we catalyze investment to create and sustain job growth within target sectors. The last of the pillars is the Strategic Innovation Centers, which are facilities that directly support R&D, innovation, or entrepreneurship. An example is HACS, based in Newark, that is focused on decarbonization, digital manufacturing, and automated supply chain. Specifically around clean energy, we're launching this month our SSBCI-funded clean energy loan program called NJ Cells. We will be lending up to $10 million to companies and/or projects in the clean energy sector. Additionally, we're working on launching the NJC PACE program and standing up a green fund. There are more of such initiatives that my colleagues would cover later this morning. With that, I would like to pass the baton to Bob Ketting at the DEP.
Thank you, Ram. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thanks for being here with us today. My name is Bob Kettig. I am the Assistant Director of Climate Change, Clean Energy, and Sustainability at DEP, and the RGGI program is within the element of that I oversee. Next slide, please. So what is RGGI? RGGI is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI. It is a market-based program, and it's designed to cap and reduce carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel power plants, electric generating units, at or above 25 megawatts of capacity. So it's important to note that each state participates in RGGI under that individual state's regulatory or statutory authority. Currently, RGGI is 12 states, including New Jersey. And through these statutes or regulations, which I discussed, they are based on a RGGI model rule. And the key tenets of that rule are adopted by the individual states, but individual states have state-specific requirements and considerations they incorporate into their own state rule. And the states established this CO2 budgeting program, and it's based on the individual state's regulatory or statutory authority. Next slide, please. So how does RGGI work? So RGGI works in a sense that it is a regional cap established for CO2. So amongst the 12 states, caps emissions in tons that are permitted to be emitted from the regulated fossil fuel units. So again, that's fossil fuel units that are above 25 megawatts of capacity. The regulated sources are required to purchase in quarterly auctions allowances that equal the CO2 emissions over a 3-year control period. So these quarterly auctions are held. The individual facilities, corporations that own the facilities have to purchase allowances through these auctions or through market participants in a secondary market equal to the emissions that they have over a 3-year control period. So at the end of the control period, the source is required to have purchased allowances that are equal to the emissions during that 3-year period. Now, how does it reduce emissions? So the cap declines over time, and that sends a price signal to the market. So we're effectively pricing carbon based on a supply and demand. Because units have to purchase allowances equal to their emissions, lower emitting units sources have less of a cost to generate electricity and are more economic in the system. And of course, renewable energy sources or zero carbon emitting sources don't have to purchase any allowances, so they would have an advantage in this market. Lastly, but certainly not least important, and what we're here to discuss today, states through their own laws and rules invest the proceeds of these CO2 auctions in specific initiatives, and they use those allowances to reduce the cost of the overall program to ratepayers. So reduce the cost to ratepayers by reducing the demand for electricity and investing the proceeds in projects or programs that reduce CO2 emissions. Next slide, please. So there's 2 key components to the RGGI program on how to achieve the emission reductions. So the declining cap, again, as I said before, sets an allowance price, and this sends a signal to the electricity market. So the cost of compliance is lower for sources that emit less. And as the cap goes down over time, that sends a restricted supply to the market, and that's reflected in the supply and demand curve. Secondly, and what we're discussing today is that states auction the proceeds. States auction proceeds are used to achieve the greenhouse gas reduction. So that's a key tenet of the program, and that's embedded in many of the states, RGGI states laws, including New Jersey's, that we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through the investment of these proceeds or through demand side strategies like energy efficiencies. We're going to reduce the demand for electricity. Next slide, please. So here's kind of a historic overview of New Jersey's participation in RGGI. The original participation goes back to 2005 when New Jersey was one of the original signatories of a MOU amongst the RGGI states at that time to essentially create this program which we are in today. The 2 key statutes in New Jersey that were passed, the Global Warming Response Act, establishing many of the greenhouse gas reduction goals that we have today. That was also revised and readopted in 2019, and the Global Warming Solutions Fund Act, which specifically outlines in statute what New Jersey is supposed to do with the RGGI auction proceeds. So New Jersey participated again in the first few years of RGGI, and then they pulled out of RGGI after the first control period. So I believe that was 2011 when New Jersey exited RGGI. New Jersey, again, is under an executive order to re-enter RGGI, also to ensure that RGGI proceeds are invested in programs that reduce the impact of climate change on the communities which have been affected, had the most adverse effects to it. We adopt new RGGI rules, again, under the original statutory authority, and New Jersey enters back in RGGI. We started in January of 2020 back into the program. So we released the first funding plan. It's hard to believe that I remember going through those stakeholder events, that we've gone through 3 years and we're stakeholder in the second plan, but this is where we are. That covered the years 2020 to 2022. Again, it focused very heavily on the largest greenhouse gas emitting sector, which is transportation. And we're currently funding a number of initiatives in there, the New Jersey ZIP program, a number of investments into heavy duty EV charging, and most recently announcements of another $70 million towards transportation projects. Next slide, please. So here's a quick overview of our statutory requirements of essentially what we are supposed to do with the RGGI auction proceeds, and be good stewards of that money and achieve the outcomes mandated in the Global Warming Solutions Fund Act. So the Global Warming Solutions Fund Act, again, passed in 2008. It establishes that New Jersey participates in a CO2 emission trading program, which RGGI is, and it established specific state agency funding lanes to allocate RGGI proceeds. It sets clear boundaries that require agencies to spend RGGI funds within specific programs. So high-level overview of this, essentially, the proceeds are divided up amongst the Economic Development Authority, which is charged with 60% of the funding, the Board of Public Utilities, and let me just give a high overview. The Economic Development Authority is focusing, can you go back, please? Oh, sorry. Commercial and the institutional industrial entities. The Board of Public Utilities is focusing on low income and moderate income residential sector, and they are allocated 20% out of the fund. And then DEP has 20%, but it's split in two ways. 10% is going to programs specifically targeted at local governments, and 10% is for programs that center around carbon sequestration, and that's being done by forestry programs, tree planting, and also tidal marsh restorations. Next slide, please. So the DEP proceeds, there's 6 objectives that are defined in the Global Warming Solutions Fund rule. One key tenet is, and a requirement of the statute, is that a net reduction of greenhouse gas emissions or net sequestration of carbon is required as a result of the investments which we are making with the auction proceeds. The second requirement in the Solutions Fund Act is significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and reduction of impacts to ratepayers, and a significant contribution to the achievement of the state's 2050 Global Warming Response Act limit. So again, just a quick review, the Global Warming Response Act requires that New Jersey achieve 80% reduction of economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And a key tenet of what we're stakeholdering here today, and mandate to be good stewards of the investment of these proceeds, is that these investments have to show this reduction, reduction in energy consumption, this reduction in greenhouse gas emissions relative to the cost of the project or program. So we want to get good value for our investments and get as much input and stakeholder these initiatives. The third is a reduction in energy use, and be directly responsible to the recommendations of the legislature pursuant to the Global Warming Response Act. So again, we have the 80 by 50 report. It outlines pathways based on the 2019 EMP, how we're going to get to 2050, and our investments of clean energy or greenhouse gas abatement programs such as RGGI should be responsive to that act and to the report which outlines it. And also provide co-benefits. So co-benefits, that's pretty wide, but co-benefits could include co-pollutant emission reduction. As you reduce the consumption of fossil fuel, you're also going to get this ancillary benefit of reduction in criteria pollutants, ozone precursors, NOx, VOC, black carbon, co-pollutant emission reductions, and the potential for job creation. Also, those are the 5 key tenets of the Act. And then consistent with Governor Murphy's executive order, we are to be directly responsible to the negative impacts of human health and the environment in communities that are disproportionately impacted by the effects of environmental degradation and climate change. Next slide, please. So key thing here. So what is the strategic funding plan? So the big takeaway that you have from the strategic funding plan is that the funding plan allows for coordination across New Jersey's agencies and identifies how New Jersey will invest the RGGI auction proceeds. So again, what we're doing is it's jointly developed by the DEP, the EDA, and the Board of Public Utilities. So we want to look at the mandates of the Act and where our lanes are for funding, and try to identify opportunities where through coordination we can leverage our opportunities and achieve a greater reduction for the dollar spent. The plan will identify initiatives that will be funded for the RGGI auction proceeds, again for this next 3-year period, and it ranks the importance of each of the objectives for each initiative. It summarizes projects and programs, spending, and the results achieved during the prior strategic funding plan period. So we're going to do a look back, see what's working, see what we can do better, see how additional opportunities that have arisen in the last three years that we want to explore and take advantage of some different projects and programs. And it requires four public meetings prior to the release of the plan. So that's what we're initiating here today. Next slide, please. So again, this is a kind of a recap of what we're charged with looking at, and we're developing the plan. The first 5, which I've already outlined, are mandates from the Global Warming Solutions Fund Act. But we take this very serious. This is time is the essence. We need to achieve CO2 reduction, mitigate climate change. New Jersey is a leader in this, and we want to be good stewards of this money. We want to get public impact input, and we want to achieve the greatest result for the dollar spent that we can. And again, just outlining that the 5 key tenets of the statute, and then consistent with Governor Murphy's executive order, that we take very seriously to be directly responsive to the negative impacts on overburdened communities. Next slide, please. So the first RGGI plan was launched, as I said before, in April of 2020, and it focused on 4 initiatives. They were to catalyze clean and equitable transportation, to promote blue carbon in coastal habitats, 3, to enhance the forest, and specifically urban forest, and 4 was to create a New Jersey green bank. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a overview of the RGGI investments and what we've achieved from them from 2020 to 2022. The New Jersey total proceeds has it's about $372 million. There's been 153 projects that have been selected for this first funding plan. It includes 497 electric vehicles have been incentivized, and almost 17,000 trees have or will be planted. And it's identified 56 acres of forest that are to be restored. And also in the blue carbon and marsh programs, 155 acres of wetlands will be restored. And the estimated lifetime CO2 equivalent emissions avoided is 208-ish thousand tons. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is what we're stakeholdering now is potential funding initiatives for this next plan. So the 5 initiatives which we are teeing up here for input on, and we're looking to do is to 1, advance healthy homes and incentivize a stronger electric grid. Again, consistent with transportation being the largest emitting sector in New Jersey's economy, catalyze clean and equitable transportation. And 3, to strengthen New Jersey's forests. And 4, to promote blue carbon in coastal habitats. So again, marsh restoration. Marshes provide excellent opportunity for sequestration. And 5 is to phase down the use of highly warming refrigerants. We have some new regulations that require the reporting of HFCs, and we've identified HFCs as an opportunity. So that's a new initiative for this program, which we're looking to seek input on. And again, we're going to focus specifically today on initiative 2. So the clean and equitable transportation. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to hand it off to Peg Hanna, Assistant Director for Air Quality Monitoring and Mobile Sources, and she will specifically get into some more details about Initiative 2, Clean and Equitable Transportation.
Good morning, everyone. Next slide. Okay, so we just released or just updated our statewide greenhouse gas inventory. So this is our 2020 inventory, showing once again that the transportation sector is the biggest contributor to the greenhouse gas emissions inventory in New Jersey, coming in at 37%, which is why we are kicking off this stakeholder session with a focus on transportation. Next slide. One of the things that's important to remember at the outset of this is that our approach to transportation decarbonization is a whole of government, statewide, holistic approach. In recognition of that fact, we formed the partnership to Plug In several years ago, working together with our sister agencies, the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, the Board of Public Utilities, both of whom are on the call today, New Jersey Transit, Department of Transportation, the Governor's Office, and Treasury. Next slide. As part of this whole of government approach, I wanted you all to realize and refresh your memory, if you already knew some of this, the package of incentives that we have had in place for a couple of years now. In some cases, some of these are a little bit newer, have been tweaked, but you can see here the depth and breadth and the participation of so many different state agencies as well as the federal government now in trying to bring the transportation decarbonization goal to fruition. In addition to the incentive, financial incentive programs that are listed here, you'll also see that we are focused on outreach, education, consumer awareness. We have regional and state-specific consumer awareness campaigns, as well as a focus on dealer education. We have also worked on policies and regulations and laws to streamline the permitting process for EV charging stations, just as an example. Next slide. So we wanted to get your feedback today on additional funding that could be allocated to build out that portfolio of projects and policies that I explained on the previous couple slides. So in New Jersey DEP's funding lanes, we are suggesting that our funding could be dedicated to projects in one of these three categories. The first category would be to electrify vehicles that are owned by local government or that provide services to residents, such as garbage trucks, school buses, and municipal fleet vehicles. The second suggested category is to enable charging by residents of multi-unit dwellings by funding charging hubs. This would also allow us to electrify ride-hailing services, since many of the drivers of ride-hailing services live in multi-unit dwellings. And then the third suggested category is to fund electric ride sharing and ride hailing programs. Next slide. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Olivia from New Jersey Economic Development Authority.
Thanks, Peg. Next slide, please. So the EDA is interested in funding these 4 bullets. So the New Jersey Zero Emission Incentive Program, or NJZIP for short, is a voucher style first come first serve program. In contrast to our limited rollout in phase 1, which launched in April 2021 with RGGI funding, the EDA is launching phase 2 in 2 weeks that will bring the pilot to potential purchasers statewide. NJZIP's purpose is to reduce that upfront cost of buying a zero emission, medium or heavy duty vehicle for New Jersey businesses and institutions, leveraging that RGGI funding. The second phase is testing new program functions and features and eligibilities, and is intended to build on both the successes of phase 1 and be responsive to the learnings based on our phase 1 of the program. And then, we would like to continue that and learn from both pilot phases into a multi-year program with the strategic funding plan. And then, though NJZIP as a pilot program doesn't directly support charging infrastructure, the EDA could explore different financing structures to fund charging infrastructure, which we know is a critical piece to catalyze clean and equitable transportation. New Jersey is also particularly interested in clean hydrogen applications for heavy duty transportation, such as long-term trucking and aviation, and its potential to alleviate environmental and health burdens and stimulate an equitable economic development and environmental justice communities, and particularly those surrounding those busy ports. And finally, we know public transportation is a clear part of the clean transportation transition, and we would look to support that as well. And now I'm going to hand it to Kathleen Lewis with the BPU. Thanks.
Thanks, Olivia. You can move to the next slide. As Peg and Olivia have done before me, I'm going to describe a little bit of what the BPU funding can be utilized for. So that BPU funding can be utilized to fund charging infrastructure and to promote light and medium and heavy duty electric vehicle adoption. We are primarily focused on ensuring that those impacts are really felt in the low and moderate income residential areas. So projects that include electrification in those areas are going to be important. And we currently have our medium and heavy duty charging program out, and that application is open. And so that's one of the projects we used in strategy 1, and similar projects will be moving forward and if this proposal moves. And then next slide, please. So as Bob mentioned earlier, RGGI has several objectives and goals. And so part of what we are doing here is looking at those priority rankings and seeing which of those are really going to be impacted by our transportation proposals. And so you can see here that we are really trying to hit 5 of those 6 objectives with all of our transportation programs. And the next slide, please. Off to another poll.
Yeah, I can take it from here. So thank you so much to everybody on our panel for sort of walking through the transportation initiatives. Before we jump into the public comment session, we were just going to do one more quick poll to gauge the audience's interest and support of the transportation electrification initiative. So I'll give everybody a few moments to respond. And again, this will remain open in our chat. You can sort of see how the ranking is changing over time as more folks are voting. So looks like transportation is remaining a higher priority for our next RGGI strategic funding plan, which is great to hear. As Peg mentioned, you know, greenhouse gas emissions from transportation is the largest sector in New Jersey. So if we want to achieve our greenhouse gas reduction goals, we're definitely going to have to tackle reducing emissions. So with that, I guess we're going to open the floor to comments and questions. So you can see on the bottom right of your screen right now, we did a little screenshot of our raise hand feature. If you would like to be unmuted and provide direct comment or ask a question, please raise your hand at this time and a queue will be formed. We will go one by one, unmuting folks. Oops, and I just raised my hand by accident. Unmuting folks and allowing them the opportunity. Okay. Looks like we're getting folks ready. And then I'm also going to sort of salt in. We did get some questions via email and through the registration portal and through the chat already. So we're going to go to folks here first and answer their questions and then salt in those other questions. So it looks like Terry is the first person. We can unmute Terry. All right, Terry, I think you're able to unmute yourself now. There you go.
I can. Thank you so much.
You're
This has
welcome.
been super informative. First of all, my name is Terry Mannies. I'm with Orange EV, and I'd like to give a shout out to Olivia and thank her for all of the incredible help she's given us as we prepare our customers for the first round of, round 2 of the NJ-ZIP program. We manufacture 100% electric terminal trucks out here in Missouri, and we're super excited to have this opportunity to bring new customers of ours to New Jersey. And what I would like to do on behalf of our company is thank you guys for doing that. And number 2, recommend that at any opportunity you have to keep increasing those dollars and vouchers for customers who are operating in who are operating their warehouses and distribution centers in disadvantaged communities so that we can clean up those stationary sources that have mobile sources running in and out. We want to do our part to help make those communities cleaner. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Terry. Love to hear it. Next up, it looks like Matt has his hand raised. If we can unmute or give Matt the ability to unmute himself. Thanks, Matt. You can unmute yourself now and provide comment. So it looks like you're unmuted, Matt. I'm not sure. Are you having any issues? Okay. Not sure what's going on.
Matt did have a question in the chat earlier.
Okay.
So we could just read that question now. And that question was just for RGGI funds, does a program need to meet all 6 objectives outlined by Bob Kettig or only one?
Great question. So all of the initiatives collectively that are in the scoping plan have to meet all 6 objectives. So as you can see for transportation, 5 out of the 6 are ranked critical. So for any project or program that falls under that initiative, each of the administering programs that create incentive programs or whatnot have to achieve those 5 objectives and have to evaluate those 5 objectives when they're creating their programs and granting out their funding and be able to provide metrics back to say, you know, how they supported or achieved those objectives. Okay, so I don't see any other hands raised. Seems like Matt maybe cannot take himself off mic. First, if you have any other questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Doug, I know we received some questions previously, so maybe we should walk through those now while folks have an opportunity.
We got a question from Isabel Molina. Question is, public fleets have been lacking in transitioning to electric and low carbon fuels. What initiatives does RGGI have available to help with decarbonization in the public sector so we can protect those who use and are more exposed to public transit?
I'm gonna maybe hand this over to my transportation panelists. Do one of you want to hop on and respond?
Can you read the question one more time, please, or put it in the chat?
Sure, yeah, I can place the question in the chat. The question is, what initiatives does RGGI have available to help with decarbonization in the public sector, particularly so we can protect those who are more exposed to public transit?
So I'll just point to not specifics, but if you look at the EDA plan, first and foremost, it says electrification of public transit. DEP talks about helping local government, and the BPU plans have put a priority on public transit as well. Peg, I don't know if you want to mention anything else.
No, that's a good summary, Kathleen. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you. It looks like we have a hand raised from Kip. And if we want to enable Kip to be able to unmute.
Okay, Kip should be unmutable.
Okay, I think, am I unmuted?
Yep,
we can hear you.
Okay, great. Where should a school districts start? Should they start with DEP or start with EDA? If they are interested in some funding, it's a little bit confusing. There's a little bit of overlap. So I'm just wondering how a school district knows how to start.
I think it will depend on which programs are launched as a result of this new strategic funding plan. Kip, we have a summary on our website. I can try to find it after I'm done talking because I can't multitask. There's a summary of all of the incentives offered by all state agencies for both electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging stations. So that's a good place to start. It has a comparison of what each program offers and links to further information as well as contact. So I can drop that in the chat. But like I said, I think it's going to depend on, which programs are launched. There also is the school bus law, as you know, which hopefully will be launching in the next couple months once we get the legislative appropriation. And that's likely going to have different terms and conditions than what EDA's program might have or what DEP's RGGI funded program might have.
Okay, well, that link would be very good. Thank you.
Okay, I'll do that now.
Thank you. Doug, do we want to take another question from the chat?
Sure. So we have a question that we received from online before the registration. Is there funding for businesses that have been in business for less than a year?
I don't know if Kathleen or Olivia, if you guys want to respond.
Sure. Was the question, are there grants for businesses that are open less than a year?
Yep.
Yeah.
BPU doesn't have any requirement for how long a business is open. I don't know if Peg or Olivia do.
No, we don't have that requirement either.
Great.
Okay, great. Another question we've received is, does this transit plan include things such as road diets, bus-only lanes, or other plans to reduce reliance on private vehicles?
I know, Peg, if you want to handle that one.
I'm not sure what transit plan is being referred to here.
I think it just means this initiative. Are those things being considered?
So I guess to translate, you're talking about additional public transportation or reduction in vehicle miles traveled. I don't think that is contemplated as part of what we recommended today, but the purpose of this session is to take your feedback. So I think Helene will add that to the list of things that we should consider for the final funding plan.
Most definitely. Thank you. Looks like Doug O'Malley has his hand raised. Doug, if you could enable him to unmute. Here we go.
Super. Can folks hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Well, first off, I just wanted to thank everyone for this opportunity. I heard some friendly and familiar voices this morning, so thank you to Bob and Kathleen and Peg and Helene and Olivia, as well as everyone that's helping to moderate this. The other obviously very exciting news is the joint announcement of $70 million in RGGI funds, which was announced late last week. It was kind of, I guess, first officially announced by the governor 6+ weeks ago, but obviously great to see those dollars get out the door and obviously going towards a wide variety of projects on clean transportation. So I just wanted to start off with that, and then also listening to the presentation. This is just a great idea of why we do this, right? The PowerPoints only get you so far, and just listening to the presentation, there's just kind of a number of some basic questions, some broader questions that kind of came to mind as I listened to the presentation. So just wanted to have a little bit of time to run through them. The first question that I had is just a broader question, just on the timeline for allocation for RGGI dollars. And I don't think this was discussed in the strategic funding plan for 2020 to 2022. And just curious if, basically if you can walk through the rhyme and reason of just the timing for the allocation of RGGI dollars. And if there's a thought process to have a more direct calendar in the future.
Yeah, so the funding from RGGI comes through in quarterly auctions. So there's 4 auctions per year. And I think that, and other folks can chime in here, but I think part of maybe the delay in the beginning was obviously this funding, the first funding plan went live in 2020 during the pandemic. And it is a lot of work to get brand new funding programs off the ground and to get things investing, being invested quickly. So each agency really is sort of working at its own pace and its own capacity to invest those funds. So I would, I think now that we have a few years under our belt and we're envisioning potentially, moving forward with investments in existing programs, things will continue to roll out at a clip. But for some of the newer programs, you're going to have to, again, expect there's going to be some upfront timing while we build those programs, those incentive programs, staff up, get things off the ground. So I think that from now moving forward, there will be sort of steady investments. And as just a reminder for folks that are maybe not aware, we do actually have an online dashboard where you can see every investment. It's updated on a rolling basis as, projects are announced and things like that. So there's a high level of transparency and accountability with where these dollars are going.
Yeah, no, thank you for referencing the dashboard. That's obviously been really helpful to see the applications as they come in. And Bob obviously referenced this. RGGI's been around for a long time. New Jersey's involvement in the program's been a long time. Obviously, there was a very large hiatus during the Christie years, so we are thrilled that New Jersey is officially not only back in the program in the Murphy years, but obviously allocating these dollars. Just on that issue of very important issue of the money that's being allocated. In one of the slides, it talked about the kind of total allocations from RGGI and then the total awards. And it looked like there was non-allocated awards that were quite significant. I was just hoping that folks could kind of reference, just provide a little more clarity on how much the kind of the delta between the amount of money that's been collected through the auctions versus the money that's been allocated.
I think we're probably over about 2/3 have been, firmly dedicated to specific projects and programs. And I think that, probably by the end of the year that all of the remaining auction proceeds from, the first round, sort of the first 3 years will have been dedicated. Again, it's just sort of, getting the application periods open, a lot of these grant programs are it just takes time to review applications, to get into grant agreement, that kind of thing. So.
Got it. So there's roughly, because I just did some quick math, it looks like there's a 112 million that's not that's not allocated right now. Is that accurate based on the slide from earlier in the presentation?
I'd have to look back and see. I think that those were kind of just really rough numbers.
Got it. But
I'd say probably about 100 million is maybe not firmly, dedicated to a particular project or program right now. But I mean, I think these things are earmarked to go into next sort of rounds of things. So.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that clarity. And then there was obviously a reference to the RGGI dashboard, which is obviously great for kind of seeing the projects that have been allocated dollars. And this is a question, and also a little bit of a friendly suggestion as well. What are the percentage of projects that have not only been allocated, but the project has been delivered, right? Obviously in a vehicle, we know there's been supply chain issues. So just kind of curious on the percentage of not only awards that have been made, but the actual product being delivered. And then if there's a thought process to include that in the dashboard in the future.
I do believe on a project level, and I'd have to look, I think we have different statuses. So I think the status is it's been selected, which signifies that, it's either been announced or we know that we're going to be getting into grant agreement. It's awarded, which means that it is in grant agreement. There is some commitment of funding, and then it's completed. And those are sort of the three phases that we track within the dashboard. I'm not sure of the percent of projects that would be considered completed. Again, a lot of this really does, so much of the funding went into transportation, and there are, intense supply chain issues still occurring. So, I think over time, hopefully in the next year or so, we're going to see a lot more projects move into completed. I'd also say for the sort of green infrastructure projects, so the reforestation, the urban forestry, and the blue carbon projects, those are on much longer timescales of 3 to 5 years for completion. So those are going to be a much more longer timescale.
Yeah, no, thank you for, it's a smaller allocation of dollars, but yes, it takes a little more time in those things.
Yeah.
Thanks for that broader explanation. And then I just have kind of two more kind of global questions, and then some kind of nuts and bolts questions. Obviously New Jersey is not the only state in RGGI, and it's really exciting to see really the whole Northeast and Mid-Atlantic to be part of the project and the program. How much are state agencies just looking at the successes from other states, especially those that have been in the program longer? And then, so I guess that's just a very broad question, but how much are state agencies, especially as we're coming up on the next strategic funding plan, looking at what other states are doing and potentially, borrowing some of their best ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have been incredibly intentional about doing peer state review and the creation of all of our grant programs. And we actively participate in all of the RGGI, there's work groups to sort of learn from our sister states and what they're doing. And all of that information does get disseminated and shared regularly throughout the agencies. I think New Jersey, is a leader, wants to continue to be a leader, and to continue to learn as well. So I think, you'd be surprised at how in-depth and intentional we've been the last 3 years.
Yeah, that's just really helpful to hear about that peer review process. So just appreciate it. And I'm sure there's a lot of meetings, a lot of meetings that go on. So just, that's helpful to hear. And then one other just kind of global question here too, the RGGI Inc. Is it kind of initiating the third program review for the program that will be ongoing this year? Obviously, the program review is related to obviously allocations in the auction process, although it's not directly linked. I'm just curious how much the two in your mind are kind of linked, and how much the strategic funding plan would take the program review into account. Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe Bob, do you want to chime in? You've kind of been leading the charge on program review.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Doug. Really, they're two separate things, because you have to recognize that this is, the states are are not entering RGGI under a compact, so it's a critical component that the states are operating under their own regulatory and statutory authority. So the funding part of this, while the states the RGGI states have common policy goals, clearly for incentivizing the greenhouse gas reduction and specifically to funding initiatives in overburdened communities and mitigating the impact of this program, any program, on ratepayers. The individual funding decisions are totally within the purview of the individual states under their own policy and their own legal processes. So while the RGGI program evaluation is more of the structure of the actual program, the investment of the proceeds fall within the individual participating states.
Yeah, no, thank you for providing a little more color there. Obviously, linked but not directly linked. But yeah, thanks for just providing a little more background there, Bob. I just wanted to just move on to nuts and bolts questions, some basic stuff, which you may review later. What is the time? The poll is very helpful, or I guess not the poll questions that have been in the chat, but the QR code. That's a very detailed. I guess it's more of a survey. That's obviously a form of comments that that the department is collecting and the administration is collecting. Is there a broader deadline for comments?
Yeah, April 21st.
April 21st. That's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then what is obviously there's a multitude of webinars over the course of the next week or two. Once those webinars are completed and the comment deadline is reached, what's just the general deadline for the strategic funding plan or timeline?
We don't have a firm date. I mean, we're looking to get it out this spring. So. Got it.
Okay. So as fast as possible, which is great. And then one last just question on the most recent award. Will the because obviously there were many awards, which is great. Presumably there were obviously many awards that did not that weren't able to be in that queue. Will those be available on the non-winning applications? I know that has been available in the past on the DP website.
I'm gonna ask Peg to answer that one.
The non-winning applications. So we kind of keep a running list of applications we've received, and as additional funding becomes available, we go back to that list, which is how we developed this list of 70 million. So you're asking, I guess, who is still on the waiting list?
Yeah, exactly.
Sure, I think we can make that publicly available. I think it's more of a resource issue to get that all logged and up on our website, but I can go back to my staff and see if we can make that happen.
Super. Thank you so much. Much appreciation, and thank you for having the opportunity to ask several kind of in-depth and some basic questions as well. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Doug. So anybody else? Oh, it looks like Carla has her hand up. Doug, if you could enable her.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Fantastic. So I had a question about, mostly on New Jersey ZIP, but it may apply to other funding sources that are sort of directed, let's say, toward individual consumers. It's not the state. I was wondering if your plan was to release the money sort of in one big go, sort of how New Jersey ZIP did the first time, right? That it was first come, first serve, or are you planning to release some of it, sort of allocated over several years?
Olivia.
Yeah, so phase 2 is launching the same way as a first come, first serve voucher program. I think we'll take both the phase 1 and phase 2 learnings and if we move forward with a multi-year program to decide then what to do.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Doug, do we have any more questions from the chat we should get to now?
We do. We got a sort of a follow-up clarifying question from Isabel from their question earlier, and that is, I'd be interested in learning more about the decarbonization initiatives for medium and heavy-duty vehicles through RGGI funding, particularly on decarb of heavy-duty vehicles using green hydrogen. Wasn't sure if someone from the agency transportation group could speak to that question.
If not, Bob, I know maybe you could give it just a little background.
Well, we did not fund specifically fuel cell vehicles during the first initiative. I mean, we'd welcome input on this. You know, there's a lot of parallel things going on in the hydrogen world. Really, the first really foremost is the Department of Energy Hydrogen Hub Moonshot, which New Jersey is a participant along with New York and a number of other states. So, you know, I think that you know, as we look at initiatives for clean transportation and really greenhouse gas abatement in general, it's kind of balancing like where those individual sectors and strategies are for deployment, technology development, opportunity, and where there are like niches where funding can move the market. So we welcome opportunity, but I think we're also looking at when there is parallel things going on, that the RGGI funding may better be served in current initiatives which we can deploy in the near term.
Thanks, Bob.
We also had a question from Mark L. Scotland in the chat regarding transportation funding. Is there consideration for use of RGGI funds to assist residents in disadvantaged communities who fail emissions tests to get assistance for vehicle repairs to help mitigate greenhouse gas emissions?
I don't know, Peg or Kathleen, do you want to address that one?
We have not historically considered emissions repair programs as the right way to say it. We typically have not provided funding for emission repair type programs, Mark. I suppose we could consider it. I'm not sure we're going to get a big return on investment there. Our greenhouse gas reduction goals are so ambitious that focusing on decarbonization or electrification is really our first priority. I understand that, you know, getting an ICE vehicle back up to certified levels will help mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, but not to the same extent as turning over that vehicle to electric. So I think it's not out of the realm of possibilities. I'm just not sure it would land very high on the list once we look at cost benefit analyses.
Great, thank you, Peg. Okay, so I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, but we're at the end of our chat questions and our pre-approved questions or pre-asked questions. So if anybody else would like to provide a comment at this time, please raise your hand. And if not, I think we're gonna just move forward. Give it a moment. Okay. Matt, you want to try one more time? Your mic is enabled, so you should be able to unmute. Or Matt, I'm sorry if I said mic. So there should be a little microphone icon at the top right of your screen that you can unclick. I don't know, maybe if you want to hop in the chat and pose a question, if you're unable to unmute. Just give you a few more moments. Okay. He says, can't unmute. Please discuss environmental justice requirements for RGGI projects. Great question. So as Bob noted, you know, ensuring that funding investments get into the communities that are most heavily impacted by climate change and environmental pollution is really a foundational concept for the investment of RGGI funds. I don't know if maybe each agency just wants to maybe unmute and go through and talk about how they've addressed that, because I think each agency, you know, has done that maybe in a little bit of a different way, or has their own perspective on the way that they're achieving that. So I don't know, Peg, if you want to maybe go first.
Sure.
And just say.
For DEP, all of the funding that we've received from RGGI as well as from Volkswagen and other sources has gone to projects in environmental justice communities exclusively.
Great, thank you. Olivia or Kathleen?
Oh, go Olivia.
All right, thanks. For NJ Zip Phase 2, we stayed in only 4 piloted communities that were designated environmental justice communities. In Phase 2, we did open up the program statewide, but we have a 10% funding bonus for applicants who opt to drive in those communities, also statewide. So that's how we're supporting it.
So the medium and heavy duty charging program that is currently accepting applications and is utilizing RGGI money is specifically for charging of medium and heavy duty vehicles that are in and serving overburdened municipalities, which is a narrower subset of the environmental justice communities. And in general, our BPU EV programs offer bonuses to anyone who is in those overburdened municipalities as well. And that's without RGGI dollars, but something that we're doing in those communities.
Great, thank you. All right. So one last call again, if anybody else would like to raise their hand or drop something in the chat, just give it another moment. Okay. So I think I'm just going to close out then, if we go to the next slide. So as I've already mentioned, we have a more in-depth survey that you can definitely drop in any comments that are initiative specific within that, as well as there's an opportunity to identify if you would like to join our listserv, so you get sort of updated information about RGGI and our program. And our next steps. So we have 3 more public events that are coming up on April 11th. We are actually hosting an in-person hybrid event at NJIT in the evening. So you will have representatives from each agency in person at this event. It's at the atrium at NJIT. And it is from 6:30 to 8 o'clock in the evening. We're going to be discussing all topics at that meeting. So it'll be more freewheeling and open. The next event we're going to have is on April 13th. This will be another webinar styled similarly as today, and it's going to focus on buildings, grids, and refrigerants. And then our last webinar will be on April 18th, and that's really going to focus on that last 10% dedicated to New Jersey for carbon sequestration projects and programs. And that will be the end of our stakeholder events. We will continue to accept public comment until April 21st. You can do that via the survey. You could do that directly at our RGGI email account. If you just go to nj.gov/RGGI/engage, we also have a comment box on that page. So, you know, lots of opportunities, lots of different ways to provide comment, to give us your feedback. So thank you for everyone. Really appreciate your time today and all of your sort of thoughtful discussion. And I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you.